This is our second week of Advent, and as I have been pointed out, the way that I'm handling this, which I started last year for the first time, is I am departing from the traditional approach to Advent, which is basically an awaiting or an anticipation for the first coming or for the second coming, depending on what religious persuasion you are and where you're at with this whole thing. But I'm basing it on the four aspects of God: life, love, power, and intelligence. And we're looking at each of these elements, these aspects, as we go through this process. And today we are looking at love. And let me just kind of recap what I talked about last week. And that is that we have up here an Advent wreath with 4 candles, which will be familiar to you if you are. The colors will not, but the wreath itself and the whole concept will be familiar to you. And the symbology that we're adopting here is that the evergreen wreath represents God, the eternal, has no beginning, no end. And we think of God not as a being, but as pure being. Not as an old man in the sky or an entity, but as an essence, an energy that permeates all things. And I have compared this to, or just a way to think of it, is the grass in your yard. You mow your grass and there is this energy in every blade. It is intelligent. It knows how to heal the wound that you inflict on that grass. I'm sure that you don't think of that when you're mowing your yard, that I'm inflicting a lot of pain here. I don't think grass responds in that way. But there's something in even a simple blade of grass that understands how to regenerate, how to bring healing and new growth. And it takes a week for it to get back about a week to get back where it was. So if you just project that thought into everything, that energy is every place. My cat got hold of me last night somewhere. It's almost healed already. But we were playing, and she calls it playing, I call it survival, basically, when she gets in that mood. But she gave me a little whack on the arm. She got into this box. Cats get in a box, they turn into this mountain lion thing. But I got a little bit too close, and she just swiped and caught me. But anyway, there's a wound, and so something in me knows how to heal that. I don't know how to heal it. There's an intelligence. There is a life energy in me. It's in you. It's in all of us. And that's how we think of God. And for some people, this is very difficult. It's like the little girl said, I want a God with skin on. Somebody I can think of and see and, think of it as a parental figure and all that. But this field of energy that we live and move and have our being in, and you'll see references throughout the Bible that will deal with God as an old man or as an entity, but also as Paul pointed out, it is in him that we live and move and have our being. How could we live and move and have our being in an entity? I certainly understand how we could live and move and have our being in an energy field, in an atmosphere of energy, and I can see how that energy would permeate every atom and cell of my body and every atom and cell of every place in this universe. I see how an energy could be omnipresent, present everywhere equally at the same time. I could see how it could be omnipotent, all power, all that is power, everywhere at the same time. We think of a powerful God as this big, muscular, white, flowing-haired figure, beard and all, that shoots lightning bolts out of his fingertips, and we think of power in that way. But there's power in that blade of grass that comes back once it's mown. That's a power, and that's the most common type of power we see. There's power in the song of a bird. There's power in a raindrop. There's power everywhere. And all law, omniscience. You can see how God is energy. A field would be how it could be everywhere present as law, all law. And we see that patterns, every place we look in nature. I was out photographing geese coming in last night, landing, and they come in a V. You've seen them. The cranes do that as well when you see them flying over. I didn't know what those cranes were when we first moved here. I thought they were snow geese or something. That they had a strange honk, but they I found out they were cranes, but they fly in a V also. But there's things like that all through nature that you see that are you see order, and you see law at work, and just the way that our Earth is sitting in this, being held in its orbit, the way it is, tilted just a few degrees either direction. They say that we would spin off course and all kinds of bad things happen. But anyway, this idea of God, the wreath, it's a good illustration. It's round. There's no beginning, no end, and that's a symbol of God. The candle in the center represents the Christ, and not Jesus, but that Christ spirit, that spiritual essence in us, in every one of us, the soul. It's that center of power, and we all have it. Again, as I think it was Paul said, Christ in you, your hope of glory. He wasn't talking about Jesus. He was talking about a dimension of consciousness where we are aware of our connection with the universal. As Emily Cady talked about, the drop of water from the ocean, the water in that drop is the same as the ocean. It's not the ocean. It's an individualized expression of that. But it's the same stuff. And we say that the spiritual dimension in us is an expression of God. God dwells in us. Say the kingdom is, look low here, low there, but the kingdom of God dwells within you. From Luke. And that is a concept that is argued across the religious gamut, of course, but that's to be expected. There's so many views. Most religions treat God as an external entity. And that's fine as far as it goes, but when you start coming to just several things that you'll find, like, why would the Bible say that we're created in the image and after the likeness of God? If you take a cup of water out of the ocean, you'd say this cup of water is in the image and likeness of the ocean. It's one and the same thing. Or you take a sponge and you dip it in the ocean. The ocean is in the sponge and the sponge is in the ocean. There's no place where one leaves off, essentially, and the other begins. The life or the water in that sponge is the same as the water everywhere else in the ocean. And that's oneness. The sponge itself is an individualized, it's an entity that we can see and we can identify as something separate from other sponges. But that water that permeates it is one and the same with all sponges that are immersed in the water. So the Christ in us, when we speak of that, we don't want to shoot our minds back 2,000 years. We want to say that is simply a religious term for our spiritual nature, for the soul. Some don't like to use the word soul. It feels old. But I like it. I like it, and I hope to kind of redefine it or rethink of it as just the spiritual dimension of every one of us, that image likeness of God that every one of us are, that drop of water from the infinite ocean. So that's what that center candle represents. And the four, beginning with the green one that I lit last week first, represents life. And the one I just lit today represents love. It's red. And I should say that life expresses through us as enthusiasm. That's how we know life. That's how we see it in other people and other things. It's fun to watch animals play. They're full of life, we say. They're enthusiastic. When you get an idea, you come alive. When you get some kind of a brainstorm and working on something in your life and you get an idea of how to solve a problem or whatever, you get excited. It's enthusiasm, it's life. Love is expressed as understanding. The more loving you are, the more understanding you are. Just a natural thing. You don't have to try to be understanding if you are tapped into love, and I'll focus on that today. The third power is strength, or third element is power, and that power expresses as strength. Physical strength, strength of character, faith, strength of faith. We express power in all kinds of ways, big dramatic ways and not so dramatic ways. But it's here, it's everywhere. And that's what the idea of God as omnipresent is. If I feel powerless, I begin to affirm power because I'm in it, and I begin to affirm it. I open my mind to the presence of power. That's what's important about the idea of omnipresence. Intelligence, you don't have to go too far to see intelligence. Bird building a nest. How do they know how to do? How does a spider know how to build a web? How do they even know to think about? Do spiders, are they born with this or hatched with this understanding of flying insects? How do they know this? There's an intelligence that permeates everything, and everything knows how to live in its place. Human beings, I think, have the most struggle with that. And that's pretty amazing because we're the highest expression of intelligence there is. We're so smart, we invent problems. We invent all kinds of misunderstandings. We invent old men in the sky that throw lightning bolts at us. We invent sin. We invent all kinds of weird things. But that's still intelligence. It may not be an intelligent use of intelligence, but it is intelligence. And that expresses as order. Where we see the presence of intelligence, which is everywhere, we see order. And that's important for us when our lives, everything seems to be falling apart. We affirm divine order because we are immersed in infinite intelligence. We acknowledge that and we begin to establish order. It begins to express through us. So that's the setup. That's how we're approaching this week. And just to give an illustration, those of you that were here last week saw this, but you think of God as, again, the ocean, the infinite presence. And think of yourself as this prism, the soul. It's the place where the universal comes to a point of light. And then on the other side of that is an expression of this spectrum, this color spectrum of love, of life, love, power, and intelligence, expressed in all kinds of different ways that are unique to us. That we all draw from the same source, but we express it in different ways. If you hand the same palette full of paint to 10 different artists and say, paint a dog, do you think all 10 artists are going to paint the same thing? You're going to have 10 totally different dogs. But they're drawing from exactly the same palette, same colors. But there is something that we do to the universal. We take the universal and we individualize it the way we express. People say, is it God's will for me to be happy? God has nothing to do with it. It's absolutely God's will for you to be happy. It's God's will for you to be an open expression to this creative life force. When you give the 10 palettes to 10 different artists, is it God's will that one can paint a better dog than another, or does God favor, or it has nothing to do with it, any of that. It has to do with the artist's capability, how well they can take those colors and translate them into something that we call a painting. So we're drawing from the universal and we're expressing it. In our life, if it doesn't look all that great, we're painting. We're the painter. So we don't want to blame the rest of the world. We don't want to declare ourselves victims of our childhood or victims of our race or victims of some aspect of our culture. You can do that and you'll get plenty of company, but you won't solve your problem. And that's what we want to do. That's what this whole spiritual thing is. Why even do this if it doesn't solve problems? So we begin to say, I may not like the way my life is expressing, but I have this palette of paint that's just like everybody else's. And maybe I'm doing something, maybe I could do something to improve my result. Maybe I could adopt a little bit better attitude. Maybe I could stop thinking that I was born in sin and I'm being punished for every negative thought that I think. Maybe I could get rid of some of that stuff, some of that baggage. Maybe there's something in my perception that I could let go of, and it would help change some pretty important aspects of my life. My painting would look a little bit better. So there are things sometimes that sit right in front of our faces, and in this, I'm speaking of myself here on this particular verse, but I talk about love, and I've been talking about it for several years from the perspective that it's a twofold activity. Love dissolves everything unlike itself. It dissolves that which is not for your highest good, but it draws to you that which is. It's doing two things. It's drawing to you that which is for your highest good and dissolving that which is not. If we think of love in that way. If we think of love in that way, then we can love everybody. We don't necessarily like them, but we can love them. And what do I mean by that? We can look at everybody and we can say, love is drawing to you that which is for your highest good. And it is dissolving that which is not. That is the highest view that we can have of someone, this process in their life. Instead of wishing bad things for them or even wishing them well, to see them as in a position where love is drawing to them that which is for their highest good. What higher prayer could you pray for somebody than your highest good is now being drawn to you? And the other half of that, that which isn't working for you, is being dissolved. So I thought I was kind of onto something new here, but then I remembered this verse. Jesus, actually John is writing. We don't know if Jesus said this or not, but it's attributed to him. John wrote about 100 A.D., 90 to 100 A.D., a long time after the death of Jesus. And he comes, the material he uses is totally unlike Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Those are known as the synoptic gospels, and this is known as the spiritual gospel, but it comes from a tradition that when you put them side by side, if you have one of these harmony of the gospels, you'll see John sits over there by itself. So we don't know what Jesus said here, but this is a very profound revelation. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch of mine that bears no fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Isn't that the process I just described? That love cuts things off. It takes away things that are robbing us of life, of energy. But the vine dresser is the part that draws to us that which is for our highest good. This is a process that's going on all the time. We may have a dead branch in our life that to us is like a sacred cow. We don't want to let it go. But it is robbing us of something. And if we say love is in charge of my life, if I let go and let love, that dead branch will somehow be taken away, be brought to my attention in a way where I will gladly let it go. I'm being pruned, I'm being, and why do we prune things? We prune things to get rid of the deadhead, as they call it, or whatever you want to call it. But there's a number of reasons we do, but if there's a dead branch, it's just taking up space, and it's pulling energy in ways that we don't really want that to happen. And so, are we angry at the plant, at the vine, when we prune it? Are we doing it for its in the sense that we're going to teach it a lesson, and no pain, no gain kind of thing? A little pruning, it hurts, yeah, okay, well. Or are we doing it because out of love, out of the sense of I want the most for this vine? And that's, I think, what the message is here. That this energy we call God, this presence we call the Father, wants what is best and highest for us. And why is that? Because we are the avenues through which it expresses. Naturally, it wants the most free-flowing avenue and responds to that. So when things are not working so well for us in our lives, and it's time to let go, and yet we're so much clinging to that we don't want to let it go, and something happens where we're forced to let it go, and we call that maybe a crisis because it wasn't brought on by us. But who was it? The Chinese talked about crisis as an opportunity. It's a pruning. It gives life more of an opportunity to thrust in another direction, one that it may bear more fruit. That's the bottom line. Why are you being pruned? Why is this happening? So you can bear more fruit. That's the whole process of love. It is working through us so we will bear more fruit. It draws to us that which is for our highest good. Think of the grapevine as drawing from the soil, from the sun, from the water, the atmosphere, everything. Draws to us that, or draws to itself that which is for its highest good, and then the vine dresser comes along, and probably some of you have done that, or are vine dressers here. But you do that out of love. You do that out of the thought for the vine that it will bear more fruit. And that is a natural process. That's part of the whole thing. We think of love only as this nice attitude toward others, or something we have toward family or whatever. But if you think of love as a two-edged sword, literally, one side draws to us that which is for our highest good, the other side takes away that which we may be clinging to, we may be dearly in love with. It's like the disillusioned bride said, I took you for better or worse, but you're a lot worse than I took you for. It's just, get rid of you. So have you ever done that in your life? Took on something you thought was for the highest good of you and discovered later on it was not? And maybe it was at that time. But life is moving all the time. It's always moving. It's like you think things out in nature right now, it's all operating in a different way than it did through the summer and through the spring and fall. Things change. The birds find different ways to eat, but they know how to do that. They know how to work in their environment, in their place. But I really like this verse. I am the true vine, my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch of mine that bears no fruit, he takes away. If something's being taken away from you at this moment, think of that. It's not a bad thing. Every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. So even the good things, sometimes difficult things happen. They get our attention, cause us to open up. I would imagine most people, or many people, come to this way of thinking out of crisis. And that crisis may be, you've got too many questions, too many religious, spiritual questions that can't be answered in your present spiritual environment. And as my minister would say way back, another lifetime ago, you just have to accept it in faith. Well, I would like it explained. I don't want to just accept it in faith. That's okay up to a point, and faith is something we always use. But if you're out pruning the grapevines, don't you want to know why you're doing it? There's an understanding. The more you understand it, the more you'll know how to do it. The better you'll get with it. So the more we understand the principles, the spiritual principles, the better we get at living life. The more we recognize things that don't work so well. So we've got a couple of affirmations today. I would like to speak them aloud first, then invite you to join me and say them. I am guided by the understanding that love imparts. As we say this, just feel that it's happening now. I am guided by the understanding that love imparts. Let's say that together. I am guided by the understanding that love imparts. And that's not a brain-racking exercise. That's the kind of place where faith comes in. I believe this. I embrace this. I'm guided by the understanding that love imparts right now. I accept that is true. Love is my essence. Love is my being. And think of it in terms that I've been talking here. There's something right now is drawing to me that which is for my highest good and dissolving that which is not. That's what this affirmation is about. Love is my essence. Love is my being. Let's say that together. Love is my essence. Love is my being. Love is the balancing action in all my relationships and all conditions in my life. Okay, you can look at your life and say, okay, that's true, but over here I'm having a real problem, so I don't see it so much there. That's where you need to look. That's where you need to apply this. Love is the balancing action in all of my relationships and all conditions in my life. Let's say that together. Love is the balancing action in all my relationships and all conditions in my life. So if that's true, how would you feel? If you knew that was absolutely true, how would you feel? Wouldn't you relax? Wouldn't you feel whatever the problem is working out? Love is dissolving everything unlike itself and drawing to me that which is for my highest good. That's a freeing feeling. And that's how you know your prayer is answered, how you feel, how you respond at this moment. Okay? Next week we will move into the position of power, expressing the strength. Thanks for coming out. See you next week.
You've been watching a talk presented at the Unity Church of Grand Junction by Reverend Doug Bator. We would like to thank everyone who joined us here today in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado, as well as those of you who are joining us online. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Also, please feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested or benefit from this message. If this video brought value to your life, please consider making a donation by clicking the link below to our PayPal donation account. Thanks again so much for watching.